In today's case study, we're going to take a look at an interesting incident that occurred in 2016. One very interesting aspect of this story is that the main character is a 72-year-old grandmother. Before I move into the story, I want to mention if you enjoy the topics of preparation, tactics, survival, or fitness, you should definitely subscribe to our channel because that's all we cover and we cover it a lot. So let's go ahead and move into the story. Allow me to introduce Ann Rodgers. Ann moved with her ex-husband, who was a member of the Air Force at the time, to Tucson, Arizona in 1982. And although the marriage didn't work out, Ann fell in love with the city and decided to plant roots there and has remained there ever since. Ann is an active and vibrant grandmother. An artist by trade, she definitely has a little bit of eccentricity, but she certainly lives life to the fullest. Refusing to let age slow her down, she remains very active in yoga and is in excellent physical shape compared to her peers. It's March 31st, 2016, and Ann lives alone in her house except for a little dog, a cute black and white mixed breed. Ann is excited as she has a birthday approaching on April 4th and is going to turn 72. As such, she decides to take an impromptu trip where she's going to head over and spend that time celebrating with her grandchildren. Ann's grandchildren live in Phoenix, which is about 2 hours northwest. But even so, that's a small thing for Ann. It's a small trip to take. So Ann loads up about 2 gallons of water, a few snacks, a blanket, some clothes, her dog, and heads off on this road trip. Now, while Phoenix is a pretty direct route northwest along I-10, for whatever reason, Ann decides to take some rural roads, the backcountry, if you will. It's worth noting here, there's some variations of this story that claims Ann was going to go spend that time celebrating with friends in Cave Creek, which is just north of Phoenix, and that would better explain the route that she took. Regardless of her destination, Ann ends up getting off track onto 202 and then eventually ends up on US 60 towards Show Low, which is about 200 miles the wrong direction, way away from where she needs to go. Around this time, Ann begins to get concerned. She recognizes she's low on fuel, but nonetheless, she continues to stray on this path towards the open desert in the hope that she'll stumble upon a gas station. Unfortunately for Ann, that doesn't happen. The situation actually gets worse when the road she's on turns into a dirt road. Ann eventually runs out of gas, but she's in a 2010 Ford Fusion Hybrid, so she's able to continue driving on the electrical charge alone. Even so, the electrical charge eventually dies out as well, and Ann is truly stranded in the middle of nowhere. Ann doesn't realize it, but she's broken down just south of Fort Apache Reservation, which is primarily open desert, just a vast expanse of desert, and well off the direction of where she was intending to go. Now, this is where Ann makes a really good decision. She decides to go ahead and camp out in her vehicle. And this is exactly what you want to do in this type of situation because your vehicle provides you shelter, some limited supplies, security, and it's along a main travel route, which is, of course, exactly where any search parties are going to begin looking, and they're going to look along those routes. So she makes a good decision here and decides to just camp out in the vehicle until rescue comes. So Ann huddles up in the vehicle under a blanket with her dog and just kind of waits this out, hoping that someone will come by or rescue or somebody. However, over 2 days, no one does. After 2 days, Ann starts to get concerned with dehydration, malnutrition. She hasn't seen anyone come by, no rescue efforts. So she grows restless and she decides that she's going to leave the vehicle and hike up to this ridge that she sees off in the distance in the hopes that maybe she can get cell service or look out and see civilization. So she takes some of her remaining water and puts it into a Nutella jar. She had been eating the Nutella, eat it all up at this point. And Nutella is kind of like a peanut butter spread, but it's chocolatey. So Ann takes some of her remaining water, pours it into this jar as a makeshift container, grabs her binoculars, grabs her dog, and sets off on this hike. Now, Ann and her dog spend a good portion of the day hiking up to this ridge. It's well off, and it takes her a while to get there. Eventually, she does get there, but there's no cell service. Furthermore, she looks out and it's just vast desert and canyons. There's nothing out there. But the one thing she does see is off in the distance, she sees a stream, so she decides that's where she wants to go. But before she goes there, she needs to go back to her car, gather up some of her supplies, what little bit of supplies she has, and then she'll head off for the trip. Unfortunately, it took a great majority of the day to get there, so she doesn't make it back to her car that night, and she actually has to spend the night out in the open desert. But she does, and she survives. After an unpleasant and uncomfortable night's sleep, Anne wakes up, she heads to the car, packs up what little supplies she has, and then her and the dog head off in the direction of the stream she saw in the hopes to get some water. After a long and grueling walk, Anne eventually makes it to the stream. She gets down, she drinks, and begins to rehydrate. Now, this is an area where Anne took another little bit of a chance here. She drank this water untreated. She could have, and really should have, tried to utilize either solar disinfection or boiling to treat this water to make sure that she didn't take in any parasites and make her situation worse. However, fortunately for Anne, she didn't get sick, and all's well that ends well. I mentioned boiling water as a treating method because Anne does have fire capabilities. She's making fires along her movements overnight and whenever she stops. One, for the warmth, and also in the hope that the smoke can be seen and possibly, affect her rescue. Another good thing Anne does here is she has a lighter, and that's what she's using for these fires, but she recognizes that that's a perishable item and it may quit working or it might run out. So Anne is gathering up her coals, some of her coals from the fire, in some moss, and she's carrying it along with her from place to place as a fire starter. So Anne finishes up at the creek and decides to head further down into the canyon in the hopes to affect her recovery to get out of this situation. Along her walk, she actually spots a search and rescue helicopter off in the distance. She flags her best, tries to wave it down, and unfortunately they didn't see her. This is an area that Anne could have possibly affected recovery was if she had a signal mirror or even just any kind of a compact mirror or reflective piece of metal. She could have utilized that to signal the aircraft and they would have likely seen it even off at that far distance. However, Anne didn't do that. Either she didn't have the materials or she just didn't know of the technique, and so that was a missed opportunity. Anne is quite disheartened by this missed aerial rescue. However, she is disheartened, but certainly not broken. Instead, she adopts a proactive mindset and she is going to continue to try and survive. Along her route, she comes across some elk bones and she utilizes those along with some stones to make a makeshift help sign that can be seen from air. She further puts a business card of hers there and writes a note on it saying that, hey, I'm in bad trouble, I need help, and if you see this, please come get me. It's worth noting here that at this point, Anne has been reported missing and the local authorities are conducting a massive search. Unfortunately, no one has any idea where she is. On April 3rd, they do come across her vehicle, and that launches a 2-day aerial search and rescue, at which time Anne spotted that helicopter. This goes to further show you don't want to leave your vehicle. It's along the main search routes, and that's where they're likely going to come across first. But mistakes aside, Anne is doing an exceptional job surviving in the desert. She's living off of wild berries, dandelion greens, clover, and spring onions. Not a lot, but she's making do with what she has and surviving with skills and knowledge that she acquired from a number of years ago at a survival course that she attended, as well as the knowledge that she's picked up from her self-study of wild edibles of the Southwest. Eventually, she gets a break on her birthday and stumbles across an old homestead. There's not much left other than a few horse corrals, but they provide her a decent shelter that she can camp out and hang out over the next few days, which she does. After a few days of camping out, though, she recognizes that she's getting dehydrated. She needs to replenish her water once again, and she's really getting concerned about starvation. So she kind of packs up, heads out to go back to get some water, and this is where she catches her second break in that she spots a turtle trying to climb up the bank of a creek. Excited, Anne strips off her jacket, takes off her boots, jumps in to go and get this turtle. She grabs it, gets out, starts a fire, and enjoys the luxury of having some protein for the first time since this entire event occurred. Meanwhile, as Anne is struggling to survive out on this desert journey, a local White River Fish and Game officer stumbles across her dog alone out in the canyon. This break in the case initiates a second aerial search. During this search, they actually come across Anne's help sign and discover the note that she had left. Continuing to fan out their search, they come across her campsites, and eventually, as they head around a bend in the canyon, they see Anne at a campfire, wildly waving to get their attention. So obviously they land, rush out to recover. Surprisingly, Anne is in pretty good condition. She's able to get onto the helicopter with very little assistance, and after being taken back into town to the hospital, she's treated very quickly for some malnutrition, dehydration, and released. All in all, she's doing very well. In the end, Anne spent a total of 9 days in this grueling survival situation. And while she certainly made some errors, as any of us would, she made a lot of great decisions along the way. Ultimately, she defied numerous odds, given the time, situation, conditions, and her age, and she survived. The story of Anne's ordeal is a great example of how a proactive mentality, skills, and determination truly are critical in an isolating situation such as this. I hope you enjoyed today's survival story, and I look forward to making many more. If you did, please take a second and crush that like button. It helps our channel, but it also helps us to identify what content is popular and focus our efforts on that. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and allow notifications so you're the first to know when we put out new material.